Hi there, gorgeous, and a very happy drugstore and dupe it December to you. If you missed my initial announcement, every video coming out for the whole month of December is drugstore themed. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays are drugstore December, and Tuesdays and Thursdays are dupe it December, like today. So please subscribe so you don't miss out on 5 drugstore videos a week for the whole month of December. Today, I am reviewing 2 Wet n Wild eyeshadow palettes that have been very recently released against 2 Anastasia eyeshadow palettes. And these palettes from Anastasia have been mentioned as being dupes for the Wet n Wild ones, or I should say the other way around. The Wet n Wild palettes are dupes of the Anastasia ones. A lot of you have been telling me this in the comments, so I wanted to compare them for those who may not be aware. And the Anastasia palette is the Soft Glam palette. I'm comparing that with Wet n Wild's My Glamour Squad palette, and I'm also comparing the Anastasia Prism palette with Wet n Wild's Cosmic Collision. I also have Anastasia and Wet n Wild on my eyes today. One eye is Anastasia, one eye is Wet n Wild. So come in here a little closer. Let me know which side you think is which. All the details on how to get this look, as well as the reveal on which side is which, will be shown at the end of the video. So we'll first compare the My Glamour Squad palette against Anastasia's Soft Glam palette. When you look at them side by side, you can spot the dupes right off the bat between the Anastasia palette and Wet n Wild's version. And I'm here to tell you there is a dupe for every single eyeshadow in the Anastasia palette. You may be thinking, what? There's only 10 eyeshadows in the Wet n Wild palette. Hang on, it gets better. I found a drugstore dupe for the 4 remaining in Wet n Wild's line and Rimmel's line, so you will get a dupe for every single eyeshadow. But first I'm going to show you the Wet n Wild swatches with the Anastasia swatches. Wet n Wild has been pictured on top and Anastasia has been pictured on the bottom. No differences between either of these. The mattes and the shimmers are exactly the same. The formula with Anastasia is a little creamier, a little softer compared to Wet n Wild, but the color payoff speaks for itself right there. And like I said, you only get 10 dupes in the My Glamour Squad palette. But if you recall back to the Rosé in the Air palette that was released last year, there are 2 dupes that appear in this palette. For the eyeshadow Tempera, shade number 2 from Rosé in the Air is an exact dupe. And for the eyeshadow Dusty Rose from Anastasia's palette, number 4 in Rosé in the Air is an exact dupe for that one. And for the Orange Soda shade from the Anastasia palette, if you go to the Stop Playing Safe palette from Wet n Wild, shade number 4 in that palette is an almost next to near identical dupe for the Anastasia Orange Soda shade. I am not saying you need to go out and buy all of these drugstore eyeshadow palettes to dupe the Anastasia palette. I'm simply referencing them for people who really like an eyeshadow in the Soft Glam palette and maybe they want something that's less expensive. But what I will tell you, if you bought all the drugstore eyeshadow palettes, you still wouldn't be spending as much as you would as if you had bought the Soft Glam palette. Before the tutorial I'm showing you in side-by-side comparison, I am going to stick with the My Glamour Squad palette exclusively and compare it with the Anastasia Soft Glam palette. Beginning with the transition shade from the Wet n Wild palette, this is a dupe for Cypress Umber from the Anastasia palette. And I'm going to apply that directly into the crease. And this is more or less a cool gray, although it's trying to pull very warm on me, but it's still very, very pretty. By Anastasia over here, so you can see the difference. Goes on a little bit darker. And I've noticed that with Anastasia in the past too, when I compare them to Wet n Wild, their eyeshadows appear to be a little darker once you get them on the eyes. I don't understand why, because in the swatches they look identical. It's interesting. And to ease the transition to the brow bone, because you can see what a harsh line we got going on there, I am going to use one of the matte blending shades, the transition shade at the top of the Wet n Wild palette, which is a dupe for Burnt Orange from the Anastasia palette. So applying a little bit of this right on the edges to help blend those out. Doing the same thing over here with the Anastasia eyeshadow. And I realize that this is a dark look and I want to be able to provide a lot of different looks because not everyone who watches me is as pale as a ghost like me. If you're medium to dark complected, this would be a beautiful look on you. And that's why I like to do really light neutral looks for those who are pale like me, but I also like to do really dramatic looks like this because if you're darker, they don't look so dramatic. I mean, they actually look very wearable and oh my gosh, they can be so stunning on those of you with really dark complexions. On me, it just looks like a lot of contrast, but yeah, that's why I like to change up my looks and do a lot of dark stuff from time to time too. A lot of blending, a lot of blending. You're gonna see me cut a lot of it out. Just realize I am blending, 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 blending. And like I mentioned, if you're darker than me, feel free to go with the black shade at this point. It would be stunning in this look. I'm going to try to keep it a little lighter. I'm going to take the light pink eyeshadow and apply that to the inner half of the lid. Now the idea that I had for this originally, I'm going to throw this out there if you want to change this look up a little bit, was I was going to apply the black all over the lid and then use the pink as a highlight in the center of the lid. So you can do it that way too. It's completely up to you. Take the pink from the Anastasia palette and apply it in the same placement. Then I'm going to take this shade from the palette right there and I'm applying it to that blank spot right there. Same thing on this side, and you're probably noticing a big difference in quality between the two sides. Yeah, I will tell you, Anastasia is a little richer, a little creamier, but come on now, come on. For $4.99, we're talking color-wise and pigment. Wet n Wild knocked it out of the park. I'm also taking that shade and blending it up a little bit so there isn't a harsh line. To the untrained eye, somebody who does not know a thing about makeup, they wouldn't be able to pick between the two sides, guaranteed. But for those of us who do know, you were probably able to pick up on the little minute differences between the two sides. I'm gonna say it again, at this price point though, can you really complain? I really do feel like the Wet n Wild palette is an excellent quality dupe to match Anastasia's Soft Glam. Moving on to the Prism palette, and once again, I have pictured the Wet n Wild swatches from Cosmic Collision on the top row and Anastasia's Prism palette on the bottom row. There are 10 eyeshadows in the Cosmic Collision palette and 14 in the Prism palette, no different than the Soft Glam palette. For the remaining 4 eyeshadows, unfortunately, there is no dupe I have to share with you for the Sphere eyeshadow. That is such a unique color and it's not within Wet n Wild's line, so I apologize for that. But for the other shades in here, Eden can be found in the Rimmel Jewel Rocks palette, and it is the 7th eyeshadow from the left in this palette, and you can see no real difference between these two shades. They apply to the eyes the same exact way. Great level of pigment with both of these eyeshadows. For the eyeshadow Lure in the Prism palette, this is a deep dusty purple shade, and it can be found in one of the other newer eyeshadow palettes from Wet n Wild, their VI Purple palette, and its dupe is in the #1 transition shade in this palette. No real difference between these two. They apply identically. The color is spot on. Excellent dupe right here. For the eyeshadow Saturn in the Prism palette, if you go back to the Rosé and the Air palette from Wet n Wild, you can find a dupe for it in the #6 shade from this palette. It's not a 100% dupe, but it's pretty doggone close. It's close enough to the point where when you apply these side by side on the eyes, really hard to tell them apart, and I feel like it's a great replacement at a much better price point. I thought I had a dupe for the eyeshadow Unity, but I guess not. So unfortunately, no dupes for the eyeshadows Unity or Sphere. I will be referencing the eyeshadows in this palette using the numbers on the back of the palette in comparison with the Anastasia Prism palette. To begin to create the look that I'm showing you with each of these palettes, I first took number 10 from the Wet n Wild eyeshadow palette and applied that into the crease. And this is a dupe for Parallel from the Prism palette. And if you look real closely, I mean, you don't even have to look closely, you can probably tell right off the bat. Anastasia's eyeshadow is a little bit darker compared to the Wet n Wild one, but I noticed a big difference in quality between these two. Normally Anastasia eyeshadows are very smooth and easy to blend, but I had a little bit of trouble blending out that Anastasia eyeshadow, and I did not struggle at all to blend out the Wet n Wild eyeshadow. And personally, I liked the color of the Wet n Wild eyeshadow a little bit more than the Anastasia one. Like the color was richer with Wet n Wild's version. Now the Anastasia eyeshadow was a little more pigmented than Wet n Wild's, but not by much. And that could be why I had such trouble blending out the Anastasia eyeshadow, to be honest with you. Next, I took the number 3 eyeshadow from Wet n Wild's palette and the eyeshadow Dimension from the Anastasia palette and applied this to the inner half of the lid. No real difference between these two. They both applied beautifully on the eyes, very shimmery finish, and I love the color of this, by the way. And this shade is especially beautiful on blue eyes. Green and hazel eyes can pull this off too, and for those of you with brown eyes, well, you're just blessed because you can wear anything on your eyes and it still looks fabulous. Lucky you. And the next shades I took were number 4 from the Wet n Wild palette and Osiris from the Anastasia palette, and I applied each of these eyeshadows onto the outer half of the lid. They both applied easily. I didn't have any trouble blending them. I didn't have any trouble getting them from the pan onto my eyes. Very happy with both. I also took a little bit of this same eyeshadow and blended it up into the outer V on both sides to make the look more cohesive and blend everything together evenly. You'll notice that my eyelash glue is not dry. Just realized I was creating looks back to back to back that night, and I really didn't have time to sit around and wait for my lash glue, so I apologize for that. But the look that came together using those eyeshadows was simply beautiful. And when you compare the Wet n Wild Cosmic Collision eyeshadow palette to the Prism palette in the swatches, you can see that they are pretty much identical shade for shade. And that brings us to the end of the video, and I am wearing the Prism palette from Anastasia and Cosmic Collision from Wet n Wild. And if you have guessed that this eye is Wet n Wild and this eye is Anastasia, then you are right. And for the look that I'm wearing here, using Anastasia's Lure eyeshadow from the Prism palette and the number 1 shade from Wet n Wild's VI Purple palette, I applied both of these into the crease. Then I took Lucid from the Prism palette and the number 2 shade from Wet n Wild's Cosmic Collision palette and applied this onto the inner 2/3 of the lid. Finally, I took Obsidian, which is a simple matte black from the Prism palette, and the number 5 shade from the Cosmic Collision palette and applied this to the outer third of the lid and carried it up into the outer V. And then I added a simple black eyeliner to the waterline and topped it off with some of my most favorite lashes of the moment. These are a style that I've been testing out from my lash line, Inky Minky Lashes, and they are going to be added in 2019. They are called Blessed, and they are a synthetic pair. They're very robust. I think I've worn these at least 18 times up to this point, and I absolutely love them. So I will have details on all those lashes when they come out in 2019, just so you know. But if you've been looking for a dupe for the Soft Glam palette from Anastasia or the Prism palette from Anastasia, these are some excellent quality finds and at really great price points, I might add. And I hope that if you have been looking for a way to save money but still get the same results as the Anastasia palettes, that you found this helpful. And that is why I love doing dupe videos like this. I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to watch. Please subscribe for more videos in Drugstore December and Dupe It December. And I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.